Hey there friends, it's me, Andrea Walford from Make Beautiful Cards. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can use handmade pattern paper to create this birthday card. So this handmade pattern paper that I created is going to be the foundation of my card. And I really want to make sure that this comes through in the card so it's not covered by the other elements that I add to it. Now I created this pattern paper using Stampin' Up's lovely used stamp set. And this stamp set is really quickly becoming one of my favorites. And that's because it has this really nice selection of greetings. And of course, I always love greetings that incorporate a script type font. I love script fonts. And then it has this great selection of small solid image stamps. So you have a nice variety for creating a patterned paper. Now I'm not going to go through how to create this pattern paper in this video because I have a separate video called How to Make Your Own Pattern Paper, and I will make sure I link to that so you can check that out first. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I use this on a card and still allow it to really shine through even when I've added a bunch of other elements. So let's get started. Now, one of the tricks when you're using patterned paper in your cards, and that's whether you're using a pattern paper you created like this one or a pre-made pattern paper that you just purchase from your local craft store, is that you have to make sure that the patterned paper, especially if it's a bright pattern with lots going on, you want to make sure that that doesn't overwhelm your card. But at the same time, you don't want to completely cover up the pattern paper because then you really lose the effect of the pattern paper. So you really need to strike a nice balance. Now, I'm going to be mounting this on a white card front. I've just always liked white cards and lots of white space. I find that it really lets the colors and the patterns shine through and it just feels really clean to me. Now, what I chose for the main piece on which I'm going to be building my focal elements is this die cut. Now this die cut piece here, as you can see, it's not quite a stitched border, it's more of a dotted border, and this comes from Stampin' Up's Hippo and Friends die. So this die set is actually designed to work with the Hippo Happiness stamp set, but what I really like about it is that it gives you a lot of different label options. So as you can see here, we actually have 3 different types of labels. We have this one here, which has the straight lines. You have this one here, and then you have this one, and this is the largest. I don't even know what you would call this shape. All the other pieces you see here coordinate with the Hippo Happiness stamp set. But even if you don't have the stamp set, this is well worth it to get just for the labels. So I used this largest label, and I die cut it out of Coastal Cabana cardstock. So you can see here, my plan is to layer it on the center of my card, and as you can see, it still allows some of that patterned paper to really shine so you can see that pattern, but at the same time it kind of pushes it back a little bit so you can focus on what you're putting on your label. Now, as you can see, if I were to simply put this label in the middle of my panel here, and this panel is 4 by 5¼ inches, it would kind of look like it was just floating there. So in order to anchor it, I'm going to take this gorgeous ribbon that comes as part of this Playful Patterns ribbon combo pack. So it's designed to go with the Playful Patterns Designer Series paper, which is 6 by 6 paper, and there's a whole bunch of beautiful patterns, really fun patterns. And so this ribbon combo pack has this ribbon here, which I think is Pool Party, and then this purple one, and then this blue one. So I'm just going to be using this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple narrow bands of ribbon. So I think what I want to do is I'm going to put one that coincides with that area and one that coincides with that area. So if I look at this compared to my grid paper, it's about a ½ inch apart. So I've already gone ahead and centered my cardstock piece onto my grid paper. So my grid paper has the center mark. I have 8 squares, 8 squares, 10½ squares, 10½ squares. So that's how I know this is the exact center. So I'm going to grab some Scotch tape because it's going to be hidden by my label in the center. And then I'm going to stretch this across my card, and I'm just going to put a piece of tape like so. I just want to make sure. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut this. So I'm leaving about a ½ inch on either side so I can wrap it around the back and tape it down. And then just grab a little bit more tape and I said it was about 1/2 inch, right? So let's just see. The nice thing is I can reposition it if I need to. So let's see how this looks. And I think actually I want to bring it just a little bit closer together. So let's start with this one. Carefully pull that one up. You see, so that's better. So now I want to make sure, I'm going to lift this up. I have it anchored to my grid paper with a little bit of repositionable adhesive, and that just keeps it from sliding around. And then I'm going to bring this end around and this end around, and I'm going to tape it. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So just make sure that that ribbon stayed straight when I stuck it down. So now you can see that when I center this label over top, it kind of anchors it. Now, in order to stick this down, as you can see, there's already a little bit of dimension created by the ribbon. So I'm going to kind of work with that by using Stampin' Dimensionals. However, I want to make sure that the Stampin' Dimensionals don't actually go over top of the ribbon, because then the height's going to be uneven. So I'm going to start by putting one on either side here. Let's see. So as you can see, I keep placing and removing my label as a little bit of reference, because I want to make sure that the Stampin' Dimensionals don't show. So this one, as long as you don't push your Stampin' Dimensionals down, you'll be able to move them. Once you push them down against your cardstock too firmly, then they're going to get stuck and likely tear your cardstock. So now I'm going to put one at the back at the top. So now let's go ahead and remove the backings, and then we're going to go stick our label down. So that looks pretty straight. So now what I've decided for this card, I want to keep it pretty simple. So this is part of a series of cards that I've created. I'll give you a peek of them at the end of the video, and I'm going to have close-ups of each one in a blog post on my blog. But I've decided for all of them, I'm keeping the sentiment exactly the same. So I'm making this a set of birthday cards, and the focal image is going to be built in exactly the same way. So as you can see here, I've die cut the word happy, and the die set that I used for that is Stampin' Up's Well Written. I don't think they're called framelits anymore. It's their Well Written dies, and it's the happy die. And I die cut this out of Pretty Peacock cardstock. Then for the sentiment, I'm using the Well Said stamp set, or I guess for the second half of the sentiment, I'm using the Well Said stamp set, and I'm using the birthday greeting. So let's go ahead and stamp that. As you see, I already die cut the happy just to save time. So let me set this aside and let's stamp the second half of the greeting. So I've got my birthday mounted to an acrylic block. Normally you'll hear me recommend that you mount your greetings to an acrylic block that's close in size. However, in order to help me place this onto a strip of cardstock, I'm using my Stamp-A-Majig, and I find the Stamp-A-Majig a bit tricky to work with really long blocks. It's just a lot more stable with more square or rectangular blocks. So that's why I have my greeting mounted on that. Now I'm going to be using a pre-cut strip of cardstock. I like to pre-prep my card panels, and so I end up with these little strips left over, and these are perfect for creating these little greeting strips. So I'm placing some of my temporary removable adhesive onto my grid paper so that this doesn't slide as I'm stamping. Now I've already gone ahead and I've placed this on, or positioned this on, my Stamp-A-Majig imaging sheet. So all I need to do now is align where I want to stamp it, align the T-tool, and then I can go ahead, ink my stamp, and stamp. Now, if you've never used a Stamp-A-Majig before, I do have a video that shows you how exactly to use a Stamp-A-Majig, and I will link to that as well. So there you can see we now have a perfect stamp. So now what I need to do is to trim it. So let me just set this aside. To trim it, I'm going to be using, I have just a tiny little self-healing cutting mat. I have my X-Acto knife and, oh, my ruler. Hang on, I just have to grab that. So I have this acrylic graph ruler. Now I have here some purple tape This is just, it's kind of like washi tape, but it's just a very low tack adhesive tape, so it's not going to tear my paper. And I'm just going to use that to hold this piece in place because I don't want it to shift as I'm trimming it. Now I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line one of these lines up with the bottom edge of my cardstock just to make sure that I get it straight. And then I want about the same distance on this side as on that side. So I'm going to hold down firmly. I've got my X-Acto knife and I'm just going to slowly pull this along the edge. And there you can see we've now cut that away. I can remove the tape and I have my perfect little greeting strip. So I now have the two pieces I need for my greeting, and I also went ahead and I just mounted my pattern paper panel onto my card front. So this is just my Whisper White note card, and I created this out of Whisper White thick cardstock. So you can see here I have my die cut portion of my greeting, and then I have my stamped portion of the greeting. So what I want to do around these greetings is to tie in some of the elements that are in my pattern paper. Now I decided to pull out my small bloom punch, and I punched 3 flowers out of Melon Mambo cardstock. I also wanted to add some smaller flowers. So you can see here I have my confetti flower border punch, and I have this scrap strip of Mango Melody cardstock. So I didn't cut it to this size, this was just in my scraps, it was left over from another project. And so I just slide it into 1 flower, and then I flip and punch. And usually I like to punch 5 or 6 just to have. This one didn't punch properly. But then what I do is I'll often, as I'm punching, just continue to cut down that end so it doesn't get stuck in the rest of the punch, and then I end up with all sorts of bitty pieces all over the place. So I've already gone ahead and punched a few extra, so let me just bring those in here. I don't know how many I'm going to need, so I'm just putting those there. So you can see I brought in Mango Melody and I brought in Melon Mambo. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some leaves. So this leaf stamp set that you see here stamped in Coastal Cabana, I have in Granny Apple Green. And to create these, I simply took my Granny Apple Green ink pad, and then looking for my scrap of Whisper White cardstock, which seems to have disappeared. So let me just grab another piece. Just grab one of my pre-cut panels here since I have it close to hand. I'm going to ink my stamp, and then I'm going to stamp. Now when I'm starting the design process, I don't always know, or when I'm in the middle of the design process, I don't always know how many of an image I'm going to want, so I always will go ahead and stamp and prepare multiples, and then whatever I don't use, I just throw into a little basket, and then you never know, it might show up on another card. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fussy cut these out, because of course the Lovely You stamp set does not come with dies. Now I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me fussy cut, but I will mention that I do have a video on how to fussy cut like a pro, so I will make sure I link to that so that you can check that video out. So once I'm finished fussy cutting these pieces, I will be back. So as you can see, I finished fussy cutting my leaves, so now we're going to assemble this main die cut panel. So I'm going to start with my happy and my birthday. So I'm thinking that I want to center the happy, and then I want the tail to slightly overlap the birthday. However, I want the birthday to be a little offset from the end of happy. It just visually looks better than if you have it centered. So I'm going to have the happy like this. I'm just going to grab a piece of scrap paper here so that if I get any glue drips, it's not going to be on my work surface here. And I'm going to take this little two-way glue pen that I have, and I'm just going to dab some glue along the happy, but notice I'm not putting any of it on the tail of the peas because I want to make sure that I can tuck my greeting underneath it slightly. So now centering this. So that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to take the birthday and I'm going to put some glue on the back of that. I like to keep a whole bunch of different types of glue in my stash because I find I use different types of glue for different applications. So now you can see I'm going to stick this underneath. I don't want it to touch the word birthday. And then I got to make sure that that's straight. And this is where I like to bring in my ruler. See, and the nice thing about working with glue, liquid glue, is that you usually have a little bit of working time. So it doesn't dry and stick immediately. Let's see, I might be able to push that up a little bit still. Oops. Now when working with liquid glue, I always like to keep my little adhesive eraser. This is just a little piece I cut because I got a little bit of glue on there, and you can see how easy it is to clean that up and it's gone. So now I'm going to position my flowers. So you can see I have this offset a little bit, but I'm balancing this empty space by adding this flower here, and then I'll probably add one here and then one up here. My leaves. So now that I know where my flowers are, before I put my leaves in, I'm going to add my flowers. So I'm just going to take my fingers like this, and I just want to give them a little bit of dimension, not too much. So I'm kind of curving it upwards, and then I'm going to press it onto a mini glue dot, and then I'm going to go ahead and stick it down. So I'm going to do that for the other ones. So there you can see. So now I'm going to come in and check to see where I want my leaves. And I'm just changing the position of that because I want to bring it a little bit closer, but I want that area between the petals to be pointing downwards. So I can stick one leaf there, and you can see I have it slightly overlapping the pattern paper. Probably going to put one leaf there. I don't know for sure. Tuck that one like that. Tuck that one like that, and let's just see. See, sometimes you have to play with it a little bit to decide where you want to put it and how you're going to like it. And I actually think I like this configuration like that. So at this point now, I have my leaves tucked underneath, and the ones that are flat here, flat on this label, I'm just going to take a little bit of glue, put it on the back side of the leaf. So I'm not going to pull it out, I'm just going to do that to stick it down. For these ones here that overhang, the fastest way to first anchor it down is to use my mini Stampin' Dimensionals. So what I like to do, so I'm not fiddling with pulling the backing off after, is I will pull the backing off first, grab it with my little craft tweezers, and then I can stick it to the underside of my leaf, and then you can see I'm sticking that down onto my panel. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for these leaves, for this one, and then the other ones I'm going to stick down, and then once I've done that, I will be back. So there you can see we have that stuck down. So now I like to take my little flowers here, and I have the end of my pick and pick tool. I'm not sticking it actually, or not pick and pick, take your pick? Yeah, the take your pick tool. I'm not sticking it in the actual tool because I don't need to. I'm just using it to press down slightly and create a little bit of an impression, and it just curves the leaves upwards a little bit. So I'm just going to do 5 for now. And then I'll see, I might not even need 5, but we'll see how it looks when we start adding it onto the card. Now these ones I'm also going to be sticking on with Stampin' Dimensionals. So So for sure I'm going to put one there. Or sorry, not Stampin' Dimensionals. I'm using my mini glue dots to stick these down. So there you can see how that looks. I'm not 100% sure if I like this one here or not. I was kind of feeling like I don't like to leave my embellishments in even numbers. I find that looks a little odd, but this one it's not like finding its place where it really seems to fit. So I'm kind of fighting with this one a little bit. See if maybe, no, see, I don't like that. I think I might just leave that up there. I like this little bit of white space or calm space that this leaves here without having anything. So my last step now is just to add a few embellishments. So for my little flowers, I'm going to add these gold metallic pearls. As you can see, they're all over the place. They're a complete mess. So I'm just going to put one in the center of each of these flowers. Now for my larger flowers, I'm going to use these gilded gems. These are gold. You can see they're a little bit of a different shade of gold and sparklier than my little metallic gold pearls. And I'm going to use the big ones. And this is actually an awesome application for the big ones because I find that normally these big ones just look way too big on a card. I usually almost always reach for just the medium and small. But because these flowers are so big, this is the perfect size to create the flower center. So there you can see what a nice little finishing touch these gilded gems and the metallic pearls add. So there you have it, friends. You see how to use pattern paper that you create in your card. Now let me just show you a couple of other ways you can use your handmade pattern paper. So I have here a whole series of cards. So one of the things you can do is to cut your pattern paper into strips. And let me show you some different ways that I've done that. So here you can see I have a simple strip along or towards the bottom of my card. Here I created a strip across the card, the center of the card. Here you can see I have a vertical strip. So if you create, let's say you're creating your pattern paper, and one of the things I mentioned in that video is that sometimes you get these little muck-ups. What you can do is then if that happens, you don't have a whole panel wasted, you can cut it into strips, and then if there's any imperfections, you can hide it behind an element. So I actually have an imperfection hidden behind this one, imperfection hidden behind this one. So here's some simple ways to use strips. Here is another way to use strips. You can see that I cut my piece into 4 different strips, and then I spaced them about 1/8 of an inch apart onto this Coastal Cabana panel. And then, so that's cutting your pattern paper into strips. But then another thing you could do when you create your own pattern paper is to die cut it and then use the positive and negative die cuts. So here I cut this label again from the Hippo and Friends dies, and I used the label here. And then I used the die cut piece of the label, I trimmed it down, mounted it, and then I used it on this card. So lots of different ways you can use your handmade pattern paper. So I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial, friends. If you want to get a closer look of each of these cards, I will have pictures and some instructions up on my blog, and I will post the link to that. If you're watching this video on YouTube, it'll be in the description below.